teachers of Reddit, what is the best teenage wise ass remark a student has said that impressed you? We had a substitute teacher in 6th grade math class who gave us worksheets to do that day. This kid sitting in the back of the class crumples his up and proceeds to stuff it in his mouth, chew it up, and swallow it. He then raises his hand and says, "I can't do this worksheet because I ate it." That's commitment. I found that my teachers were more amused by honesty. I used to get called out for being tardy all the time, but I usually got away with it by being honest. Some freshman fell in the hall and I was laughing at him. Or my brother wouldn't pull in until he finished smoking. Apparently, totally legit reasons for tardiness. Boy in year 7 once gave me the best response for not giving me homework. Me, "Where's your homework?" Him, "Homework no input." Me, "W what?" Him, "Homework no input." Me, "Do you have your homework or not?" Him, shutting down. He then closed his eyes and stood very still for about 10 minutes. Kid's a legend. Not a teacher, but something I heard in class. Last year, my maths teacher thought himself to be quite the white Martin Luther King and wants to start the year with an epic speech, with PowerPoints and all. His first line, "Gentlemen, where would we all be if not for maths? Probably pets, sir." Not a teacher, but a student. In 8th grade we had a really bitchy teacher and she freaked out and yelled, "Why do I hear talking?" Everyone was quiet. Then my friend said loud enough for everyone to hear, "'Cause you have ears." Everyone was surprised he said it, but the teacher couldn't hold back her laugh, so he got off scot-free. My first year teaching I was a mess. This is common. So I had a challenging student who was a wise ass. I was tense as fuck trying to control him and others like him. In teacher training they do not have many strategies to manage teens. You just have to grow into it or quit. So I had them do an activity where they had to fold their paper. Folding vertically in the portrait orientation is hamburger style, and folding vertically in landscape is hot dog style. This was just bullshit elementary language they taught us. Well, this student popped up, "Your mom likes it hot dog style." That was the hardest I laughed in the classroom. It taught me to loosen up. These troubled kids, so to speak, are some of the best students I've ever had. Sadly, this kid got expelled for weed, among other offenses. We had a sub in one of my classes and his fly was down. He yelled at everyone for laughing. He didn't know his fly was down. So a classmate yelled, "Yeah guys, zip it." Then the laughter became out of control. Not a teacher, but school staff. There was a 2nd grader with Tourette's. The other kids knew about his tics and understood it and didn't give him a hard time. The kid and his mom did a little presentation at the beginning of the year. It worked really well. Anyway, there was an aide in the class who didn't get it and would tell this kid to stop doing his tics. One day, the aide says, "I know you're doing that on purpose, so knock it off." Kid looks back at her, totally deadpan, and says, "Oh, I didn't know you were a neurologist. You should talk to Drive. XXXXXX." The kid's doctor thought that was pretty badass coming from someone who had to stand on his tippy toes to use the grown-up fountain. Still, most teenagers are not nearly as witty as they believe. I had a friend who had a great one. We were in religion class and were asked what God was to us. One kid said that God is always with us, always watching us, to which my friend replied like Santa. Completely ignoring my friend, the teacher begins to write constant presence on the board. When she finishes, my friend yells out, "You misspelled presence." The whole class, teacher included, died of laughter. College student taking organic chemistry. Classes had been on topics of Le Chatelier's SP, along with others. Teacher was lecturing and was rehashing Le Chatelier's principles and was probing the class as to what he was demonstrating. No one guessed, so he dropped a hint. Says it sounds romantic sounding. Student quickly replied backside attack, another of the recently covered topics. Teacher laughed so hard and couldn't stop and actually got in floor and crawled under his desk. His reaction was better than the response. Explanation. I spelled it wrong, but is pronounced /AI's principal, which apparently sounds romantic to the professor. When he dropped hint that the answer to his question sounded romantic, the typical college bro, pop collar pink polo type, says backside attack, implying bud sex. Backside attack is indeed an alchemical topic. College professor got on all fours and hid under his desk. Older guy whose face turned bright red. Bro was not into all the ladies who turned in their seats. My math teacher had been sick for a few days and finally returned back to school. As he was describing why he had been sick, he said I was blowing chunks all day. Without hesitation, a student replied, "Who is chunks?" Needless to say, the class died of laughter and the kid was sent into the hallway for the rest of the period. Friend of mine in college was presenting a 2-page insurance idea for his RMI class, and when he finished the professor proceeds to chastise him because he had a spelling error in one of his sentences. Professor, how can I expect to trust your insurance company when you have a blatant typo? Friend, well, you just listened to my idea for the past 15 minutes, and all you can critique me on is my spelling? I'd say I killed it then, if that's the only complaint you can come up with for my presentation. Professor was so flustered. I had a kid in my psychology class in high school openly sleep every time he came to class. He was in my group for one of our discussions with the topic, "Do girls know what guys are thinking?" So we start, and he's clearly not participating, doesn't know the topic, and has resumed his nap. A few minutes later our teacher has had enough and calls him out, trying to put him on the spot with an answer. Yes? Do you know the answer to the question? What question? Do girls know what boys are thinking? He looks over to one of our slower female classmates. What am I thinking of? I don't know. Looks back at the teacher. No. Lays his head down and continues to sleep. I had Calculus 1 as my first college class. I had an old professor who was pretty good, but he would be kind of a dick answering some questions. Whenever a student would get lost doing algebra or not understand the algebra going on, all he would say is high school algebra and not answer the question. One day, we were going over a homework problem, and the professor goofed on the algebra and a student corrected him. So of course, I had to chime in high school algebra just loud enough for everyone to hear me. The professor stopped writing for a second, before sighing loudly, and then continuing. I was on parking lot duty in the morning. One of my students pulled up in a Mustang with a brand new set of truck nuts. He rolled down his window and asked, "What do you think, Miss Harpy?" "I think no self-respecting woman is ever getting in that car," I answered. He gave me a sly grin and replied, "That's okay, miss. I'm not looking for self-respecting women." One day in my English class, my teacher received a phone call. It sounded as though he was scheduling a meeting, so when he hung up, a wussies in the class said, "You got a date, Curty?" My teacher replied, "Yeah, with your mother." Whole class cracked up. Turns out the kid's mom wanted to meet with the teacher to talk about why he was failing. Couple of years ago a female student told the principal, her aunt, that I called her a chicken head. During the course of the investigation she came to my class and asked the students if they had seen anything. One student stood up and said he didn't call her anything, but he should have called her a fucking bitch. He got suspended, and they transferred the female student out of my class. We were having a drug talk from an independent specialist and she asked us how many slang names we could come think of for weed. Anyway, a whole year, around 50 boys, get to around 48 real ones, then someone piped up with Quinn, and after that we mentioned around 50 more made up names for weed which the talker pretended to know convincingly. I'm sushi looked them up afterwards and felt a twat. I had a student get called down to the main office during a test and he just seemed really confused, and then while he was signing out he said out loud, "I didn't know we had a main office. Good thing I have a full tank." It took everyone a couple of seconds to get it, and he had already walked out by the time the student started laughing. Even I was giggling pretty hard. I'm normally strict. He was a good kid.